Take that little 3/8 wide marking stick that you made and put a mark on it 3/4 of an inch in from each end. Use the measuring stick to mark the base for the screw holes to attach the leg holders to the base. You just put the measuring stick against the outline and then mark it here at those 3/4 inch marks, and that'll put the screw holes 3/8 of an inch in from the edge of the outline. When you're finished, it should look like this. We need to drill 3 more holes for the screws to attach the mount for the pole. One hole goes along this center line 3/4 of an inch from the center point. 2 more go 3/8 of an inch up from the edge, and just mark those in line with these other screw holes. I'm going to center punch those locations, and then I'm going to drill a 3/32 hole at each of those locations. All of these screw holes need to be countersunk. These 3 holes that are going to attach the pole mount are countersunk from the same side of the board that has all these marks on it. All these other screw holes, the ones that are going to attach the leg holders, get countersunk from the other side of the board. Did you measure and record the distance from the edge to the center point? If so, you can go ahead now and drill a 3/4 inch hole here at the center point. Now would be a good time to trim this base to the proper size. Just draw a line across at the top of the outline here and across where this point ends, and cut it down to the proper size. If you want to, you can keep the base square, or you can make a more angular design by cutting along these lines. If you use a miter saw, it should be pretty close to 30 degrees, but it might be a little bit off. Depends on how well you got these things lined up. If you use a miter saw, be very careful, because it can be easy to get your fingers in the wrong place when you're trying to cut at different angles. Next, I'm going to work on this piece of 2x4. The first thing I want to do is mark a line down the middle. It's very important that I have the grain running in the proper direction. I'll explain why later. So I want to make sure that the grain is this way, and I'm going to mark the line this way. So there it is, with a line marked up the middle this way, and the grain of the wood running in this direction. Choose which side of the 2x4 you think looks best, and that'll be the up side. Mark the line on the down side so it won't show. Remember that measurement that I made from the center point to the edge of the board? That was the same measurement that I made by making these 2 marks on this stick. Take and mark that same point along the line on the 2x4. Where that mark is where we're going to drill the 3/4 inch hole, and then it should line up with the hole in this piece. First, I need to take and mark a line this way from this point out to the edge. After I mark the line, I'm going to extend it up to the edge. With the grain of the wood running this way, I'm going to mark 2 1/4 inch hole locations centered a 1/2 inch in from each end. I'm going to mark that on both of these edges, again making sure the grain is running this way. Once that's marked on both sides, I'm going to drill 2 1/4 inch holes all the way through. I marked it on both sides because my drill press doesn't have enough travel to drill it in one pass. So after I have these 2 holes drilled, I'm going to use my longest carriage bolt, and I'm going to seat the bolt heads into the wood. On this hole, that's the one that's on the same side where I drew this perpendicular line, I want to put the bolt in so the head is on this side. That's going to be the side closest to that line. For the other hole, I'm going to put my bolt in from the other way. Next, drill the 3/4 inch hole at this point right here. The last thing I'm going to do with this is take it over to my miter saw, and I'm going to make a cut down from the edge to this hole. I'm going to use this line as a reference, but I'm going to line the blade up centered on that line. Now you can use a handsaw to do this if you want, but you'll have to probably make a couple of cuts because you want this gap to be at least 1/8 of an inch wide. I'm going to be extra careful when I'm trying to do this because my hand's going to be pretty close to the blade. So I want to take this again and line it up so that this blade is more or less centered along that line, and then I'm going to make a cut as far as this hole. I want to stop and work on my dowel for a minute. I've decided that for the person I'm making this tripod for, I want to cut this dowel down to about 3 feet long. So I think first I'm going to go ahead and cut this purple end off it, and then I'll cut it to length. After I do that, I'm going to check it into these 3/4 holes I've drilled and make sure that everything slides smoothly. If it doesn't, I'll sand down the dowels and the holes a little bit. Put the 2x4 on the base so that the 2 3/4 inch holes are lined up and that the edge of the 2x4 is parallel to the edge of the base. The 2x4 mounts on the same side that has all these countersinks for the leg holders. I made mine so the slot would be like this. If it turns out that the slot on yours is over here on the other side, don't worry about it. It makes absolutely no difference. So once you get it all lined up, take that other piece of dowel that you just cut off and use that to make sure that the hole's lined up. Once you get it all in place, put a couple of clamps on it to hold it in the right spot. Then turn it over and use a 3/32 drill bit to drill screw holes through these holes into the 2x4. But don't mount the screws in there yet. Once those holes are drilled, I can take this piece off again. Next, we're going to mount the 3 leg assemblies to the base. The leg assemblies go on the base with the bolt with the wing nut that's got the dummy leg in it towards the inside. It's also important to note that the bolts go away from the board like this, not like this. This is a little tricky and it takes some patience to get this all lined up right, but probably the easiest way to mount these is to put them on and get all 3 of them lined up good. Then once they're all lined up, take and clamp one of these down. Make sure that you only clamp it to the base, not to the table as well, because once you get it in place, you're going to turn it over like this, then drill these holes and attach the screws. I'm going to attach it using the 1-inch screws. First I'm going to put 1 screw into this hole, but I'm not going to drive it in all the way. I don't want this thing to torque and twist it out of position. Now I'll put one in down here, and that should keep it all lined up. Now I can finish putting that one in and put the other 2 in as well. So there's all 3 of them attached. I'm just going to take a screwdriver and double check the tightness on all these screws. because once this piece gets mounted on, some of the screws are going to be covered up and I won't be able to tighten them. Next thing we're going to do is take the wing nuts off, take the bolts out, and remove these dummy legs. With those bolts out of the way, we'll be able to put in these screws that are going to attach the pole mount onto the base. I'm going to start by putting the screws into these holes so that the points are sticking through just a little bit. That's going to help me line up on these holes. There, that looks pretty good. Now it's time to install the actual legs. I'll just slip those in between the leg holders and put those bolts back in and then tighten up the nuts. I want to make them tight enough so they don't flop around, but I still want to be able to move them. So there's the legs in their folded up position, and when you use the tripod you just unfold the legs until they touch against that first bolt. And you want to have the legs tight enough so that you're able to pick this up without the legs folding up. I need to make 3 knobs from some of this 1/2 inch MDF. Now you can make square knobs if you want to. I'm going to make round ones using a hole saw. I'm going to cut one larger one using this 2-inch hole saw and 2 smaller ones using an 1.5 inch hole saw. This MDF is probably going to kick up some dust, so I'm going to put my dust mask on. This 2-inch knob needs to have the hole drilled out to 3/8 of an inch. Now if you use this kind of drill bit, it's pretty easy then to center it on that hole and drill it out. With that 3/8 hole drilled, the knob now gets one of those threaded inserts installed into it.